distinctiveness with your new communities, or distributed solar with differential incentives. Look, some places want distributed solars, other places it makes it more expensive, and that changes with the increasing concentration of distributed solar. You get more of a duck curve. So why not set up incentives and programs that encourage distributed solar to land where you want to land and experiment with utility roles? In this way, you can all learn and scale. You can't get 7 independent actors with different interests to line up in formation all at once, ex ante. It's not going to happen. But you can by iterating and taking little baby steps. And so our suggestion for how do we get from here to there to positive economic consequences is these pilots in the middle, adjusting business model and regulatory construct as you go. Can I do one more thing? Yeah, sure. So I just have one more thing. And if you've seen this before, you're DQ. So the question is, what is this a picture of? And so here are your hints. This picture was taken in February 2005. You're looking at the prototype for something, and this prototype was cobbled from piece parts that were just lying around. They won't sell any for 28 months, but on June 27, 2007, they're going to sell the first copy of this thing. And then on March 9th of this year, they will sell these 700 million. Woodward? Good guess? iPhone. So most innovation is seeing old things with new eyes. There's not one darn thing on this table that's new. It's a phone, an old-timey phone, a keyboard, a touch screen, some speakers, an old for the slow processor, some electronics to lash it together, and a flat screen to see the code. They were prototyping the UI, and they were trying to decide, is it a list, or do we have these little rectangles with rounded corners? So they spend the next 28 months experimenting with this, and it becomes the iPhone. And they create the ecosystem around it. I like this quote: the best way to predict the future is to invent it. The best way to determine the economic consequences of new models is for us to invent them, and the best way to invent them is iteratively and prototyping, because we've got to get these 7 actors to align, or we'll be hurt by the new models. And do so in a way that we get constructive regulatory outcome. So anyway, that's my talk. Thank you.
First question. You would, in a way, extracts a common theme that everybody can touch on, that also encapsulates some of what we've discussed here today. And then the overarching theme of this conference is innovation, and how innovation is going to affect electricity production and distribution. And we've heard about the older technologies and their role in the economy. We've heard about the newer technologies and how they're aiming to displace some of the legacy technologies. And with that, and taking, trying to think of the best way to phrase the question, but you discussed nuclear, and you framed nuclear almost as a dying industry, but in many respects, we're going to hear this afternoon that it's really one of the more modern technologies that exist that could be playing a more determinant role in the future. Then we've got, you guys being the economist or giving a more economic point of view, how do you balance these legacy fuels and technologies with the emerging concepts? And I'm not sure I phrased my question exactly right, but we've got a battle of the old versus the new. And the old getting ready to exit, the new into some
I'll take one shot at it. I mean, in nuclear in particular, I don't know if it is quite yet the battle of the old versus the new, in the sense that if you look at the US solar, wind, batteries, and so on, I think what's troubling nuclear is actually natural gas. It's and it's a purely market-driven phenomenon. And it's a low gas prices that's really threatening yields. That derailed all the planned nuclear units, and it's making the existing nuclear, it's making it more difficult for the existing ones to survive. And I think you can see the contrast in Europe. In Europe, natural gas prices are very high. And as a result, as more renewables come in, coal has continued to do well. In fact, coal-fired generation has actually gone up. And natural gas units are hurting and shutting down. In terms of nuclear, I think it's a slightly different thing there. What happened in Fukushima shut down nuclear and so on. But there is not an economic case in Europe for nuclear to shut down, nor is there in any other part of the world. So existing nuclear shutting down is very US specific for economic reasons. It's very US specific and is actually driven by natural gas.
Okay.
Yeah, well, let me just respond that nuclear is not a dying industry. It's dying in this country because of market forces. A combination of the new markets and the low gas prices, it amplifies the effect of low gas prices. The canaries in the coal mine effectively are these merchant plants that are in lower LNP areas. They have higher costs. They're gone. It will spread. Outside the U.S., there are a lot of new nuclear plants being built in China and Korea. The value of nuclear electricity in those markets is very high. Everything they burn is imported, and it's much more expensive. If they have the same gas price we did, they might be doing the same thing. They don't. There are also some government roles in those industries that make them a preferred choice. We have a massive flurry of new nuclear companies being started in this country, despite the problem with the economics. If any of those plants, the new designs, can get built and prosper with this kind of gas price, they're going to be world beaters. Can they? I don't know. The jury's still out. We built some of them. We don't know.
Let me talk about nuclear and then the general case. For nuclear, it's certainly true that the challenge is low natural gas. I liked what you said, Ed, about the difference between an integrated utilities looking at the long-term least cost and the markets looking at the short-term. So in your stock portfolio, you would not go out and say, give me the cheapest stock I can find, the one that's a penny because they declared bankruptcy yesterday. You wouldn't buy that. But there's a philosophy in planning resources now that that's what we ought to do, and we lack the long-term view. Their history is forecasting gas prices, coal prices, you have it. So we are using short-term market mechanisms to make long-term resource decisions. And that's particularly unfortunate with nuclear because it's expensive and it's got to have a long life to make it work.
What was the solution to, is it a regulatory solution still with long-term, to project, that these are 30, 40, 50, 60-year investments that over time are going to be more economically cost-effective?
Well, some will say, and maybe our election speaker will say, that the vertically integrated utility model is the solution. If you were in an RTO market, what Terry Boston and Andy Ott and Mike Cormos would say is that we're taking a step in the right direction with the capacity performance product, and we need to continue to evolve our capacity markets. There, the capacity markets are still much shorter than the duration of the investment. Of course, states are going to say, like Ohio is considering, and like Maryland and New Jersey did, that we need to be king of the universe and put back some form of IRP. There's more than one right answer, but it's clear that where markets give short-term signals, it's going to be hard to make the long-term investments, even if they're wise, and where they're going to increase the riskiness of the system.
Yeah, look, it's got to be a role of some kind of government or public utility function to bring those public benefits into the equation. I mean, the utility can say, in the Utility Commission 3, we want to build nuclear because of jobs, because of clean air, because of stability of prices, because of fuel diversity. And they could say it's not the cheapest thing using analyses, but it's what we want in our portfolio, and they can do that. Governments can do that. somebody building a merchant power plant in one of these markets is not going to do that. And that's the problem.
The more general case that you asked about technologies, that there's a couple of ways you can regulate. And one way is to pick the end, what's the outcome I want, and then let the market pick the means. The other way is to pick the means and plan the economy. And with the Clean Power Plan is a little bit lean towards picking the means. And if you look at it, there is a clear technology agenda. I mean, it's not an accident that existing nuclear is not on a plan. That change was not made by mistake. They have constructed the building blocks with a vision of what the generation portfolio ought to do, and we're picking the means. You can make other work. I'm a red state kind of Republican guy, so I like pick the end, let the market work. Part of the problem is we're a camel now. We got half of one and half of the other, which is probably the worst of all possible worlds.
We talked for 2 days now, almost 2 days, about every possible type of logical scenario, but we haven't mentioned the stop. How are utilities during this transition going to make out in the markets? One.
I think that's there are multiple angles to that. I mean, I think simply the utilities are always a defensive sector of play. So anytime there's worries about general economic development and so on, utilities will tend to outperform the markets. But anytime there's very positive about growth, utilities will tend to lag the markets. But I think over the last several years, it's really been a great time to be a utility. The yields have been very good. Stock price performance has been great. 2 years ago, Moody's actually upgraded the entire utility sector by one notch as well, recognizing how good regulation has been, how they attract us for a lot of capital investments these days, and how the timeliness of recovery has improved. So we actually think it's a great time to be a utility. It has been a great time to be a utility for a few years now. The question really is can the utilities continue to where they are? We don't see how things can get dramatically better. I think it's been a really very constructive kind of environment for utilities over the last several years. So the question is, can it stay as it is, or will there be other factors that could create risks? Because when you have to spend a lot of money and you have no load growth, that might lead to rate hikes. When you have states talking like REVs that will change the business model, that could be an issue. When you have companies doing a lot of mergers and acquisitions as a way to maintain growth, that could create issues about leverage and so on. So there are other types of issues, but I think to answer your question, it's been a great time to be a utility for many years now, and we still think on balance it still is. We've seen very, very few rating changes, negative rating changes after that upgrade of the entire sector. And all of them were very specific company-related issues, not a more generic utility sector concern.
Are there any other questions? Okay. If there's no other questions, we can have a break.
No. Want to go straight to
We're going straight to Tom.
Awesome.
Fantastic. Thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah. That's great. Well, I'm going to do that.
Okay, super. Introduce you. We're going to start with our luncheon speaker, our star of the day. I know that he's the star of the day because every other speaker has mentioned him, and most of the other speakers seem to know what he's going to say. It's almost unnecessary to have it here. He could be in Atlanta doing something constructive. However, it is a great honor and for me a joy to have Tom Fanning, the chairman of the Southern Company, on our program here. He told me once that he was in a dead-end job, and that it was, I forget the initials, but it meant dead end, and then suddenly he was chairman. Well, he sort of burst on the scene as this extraordinary, ebullient, different kind of utility executive, possibly for the first time, maybe in decades, and maybe ever, the first celebrity utility chairman. Well, the idea that you could have a celebrity utility chairman of the Southern Company is unbelievable. It's impossible. On the other hand, he has become a genuine, no-nonsense leader in this industry. And there is no aspect that we have discussed in this day and a half in which the Southern Company is active, whether it is carbon capture, gas, and of course, it is the last grand hope of the American nuclear industry just at the moment. The Vogel plants, of course, it's followed closely by South Carolina, but this takes courage, it takes vision, it takes enthusiasm, and it takes a very special kind of sense of purpose in the future. All these things seem to be amazingly part of one man, Tom Fanning, and it's really so nice that he's here to be with us. I'm not going to read his biography because he's told me not to do that. He said something about a probation officer or stuff like that. And, you know, I suspect the resources of the Southern Company are sufficient that they can deal with the probation issue. Tom, thank you for coming and thank you for being with us.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. Now, that was a heck of an introduction, right? You know, I understand I stand between, is this too loud? We all right? I stand between you guys and lunch. It's clear to me after that introduction, I had not stood between you guys and the cocktail hour. So what do we have here? I got about how long?
You have actually the best part of an hour. And
And
unless somebody,
it's
I
2.5
told them before you arrived that if they were getting hungry, put extra sugar in that coffee and they would survive.
No, it's pure caffeine. Caffeine makes you smarter and more charming. So here's what I want to do. So for a little bit of time, I'll do kind of my song and dance. I don't do speeches. I just have conversations with my, you know, whatever it is, 100 of my closest friends here. So I'd like to do that. I really would rather talk about what you want to talk about. I'll kind of jump through some issues that are on my mind. But I always find it more valuable to have the engagement and not to have any kind of passive activity here. And it's interesting. I really admire who I've known for a long time, as you can tell by those remarks. He's a terrific guy. It's so much of a fascinating backdrop right now with the events in Paris. I lead for the United States under Homeland Security, all things cyber terrorism and physical terrorism. And we were something called the ESCC, Electricity Subsector Coordinating Council. And we were turned on all through the weekend following Paris and what would happen. And to me, it's such a great reminder of how important we are. You know, my dad died, I don't know, 20 years ago. He was a tough Marine, never talked to us. You know, he was one of these, you know, the great Santini kind of personalities. But as he started to reach the end of his life, he just opened up like Boston. And he was head of benefits for Western Electric, remember them, before Lucent and all that. And he had the United States from kind of Richmond all the way to St. Louis and south to Shreveport, Louisiana. And he put in place a program called the Visitors Program, so that he was trying to capture the wisdom of people that had just left the workplace. And so if they retired, looking back on their time, what did they think about their time at Western Electric? And he told me about two big themes. One theme is the one you all know, that the most valuable part of your work experience is the people that you work with. You know, it's the relationships you develop and everything else. But the other thing that he said was that when people really valued their time at work, it was because they felt they contributed to something important. And when I think about the jobs we all have, it really underscores, I think, an almost genetic predisposition to make things better, keep the lights on. When I ever talk about kind of this mission, I always like to put a picture on that. And the picture I have, in the Southeast, fully 46% of the families we are privileged to serve make less than $40,000 a year, and they have a reasonably fixed energy budget. I also chair the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta, and at the Big Fed, I'm the vice chair of what they call the Conference of Chairs. So they take all the Federal Reserve districts together. We're led by chairman, whatever they are. And so I had this kind of window on the economic world. I've always been fascinated with the confluence of electricity and the importance of playing offense in what is otherwise a very challenged economy. So I think there's this enormous common interest. See, for all the malaise we have, and not malaise anymore, but malaise economically in Europe, and when you think about event risk now in Paris, but in the Middle East and in the Ukraine, when you think of the lack of transparency in China, when you think about all these things going on, you think about an unemployment rate that people say are getting better, and yet we have more people not working than ever before, or they're working in jobs, or they wish they could have a full-time job now, a part-time job. We aren't doing as well as we can. One of the things I'm so afraid of in the American culture, and one of the things I'm going to get to you with a little bit later in this notion of challenge and change, is an idea of what's and hows. What's are the things we do, make, move, and sell. The hows are our behaviors, and how we take it as a cultural imperative to be better, or to be as good as we can be. And when I think then again about the confluence of energy in the economy, I'm worried so much more, not so much about making, moving, and selling electricity, but I am, in a national sense, about Americans losing faith and losing hope, and perhaps even losing faith in the institution of government and the people that are leading them. And through my work at the Business Roundtable, through my work in media, through my work in just kind of doing stuff like this is a gift to me, to get together, to restart this idea that we can really do something important. For all the challenges we face, we together can give people hope. We can allow them a place to play offense. Bob Murray back there. Think about what's happening in Appalachia right now. See, I understand, for example, the EPA has this idea, and I really think the EPA is going after their mission with, they think, the best of intentions. But it's people like us, it's not regulators, Congress, that have to balance the notion of providing these folks, these 46% of the families we're privileged to serve make $40,000. Somebody's got to stand up for them. And we've got to be able to provide this balance of not just clean energy, but clean, safe, reliable, and affordable energy. And I think at a macro level, we can in fact do something. You've heard about energy independence. I don't believe that. I do believe in energy security. And in my lifetime, yours, your parents, you've never had this opportunity before, to where we can create an economic profile where we depend on no one, and where we can create jobs and restart manufacturing and grow income, grow jobs and make American lives better. We can do that. And it's not just in the conventional sense. Things are changing. I always like to say you can't keep the waves off the beach. And so, you know, I'm going to use a bunch of little metaphors now, but can't keep the waves off the beach. Another one I always like to use is you got to skate to where the puck is going to be. Borrow that from Wayne Gretzky. Isn't he a Phoenix resident? I think he is.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. That's what we got to do. And I know change really scares people. And really frightens. Change our constituency. That's another little process, right? But what we have to do is, on behalf of those families, is to gather together the vision and courage to act on the vision, to skate to where the puck is going to be. Not to stop the waves off the beach, but rather to reach a destination where, for the benefit of America, for these families, to restart economic growth, to create better economic security, to really succeed, to really envision a future and invent it. We can't be driven, you know, there's another thing, I gotta tell you a funny story. I started doing a lot of TV work way back when Southern had its own TV network, Southern Community Television Network. And I remember I was CIO. You guys all know my old joke about CIO, right? You know what a CIO is, right? What's CIO? Chief Information Officer. So many days I thought CIO stood for career is over. And I remember my first day, we had interactive TV, you can call in, and you know, I just taken over the CIO job, and somebody asked me, this woman asked me, what's your philosophy on that? I said, well, I believe in Stephen Covey book. I said, well, I believe in the Stephen Covey book, you know, the effective habits of 7 people. That's a joke, right? It's the 7 habits of effective. Anyhow, and I just forgot what I was going to do with that. But one of the, the idea of proactivity. Proactivity means I choose to act, I am not acted upon. And so what we got to do is figure out a way how we choose to act. We can't take a passive approach to government, the environment, economic activity. We must choose to act. And I think with frozen government and all the problems we see right now coming out of Washington, it is in this great theater right now in this presidential election cycle that we're in. You know, what a mess, holy smokes. Who's going to step into the breach and set the policy? Who's going to speak the truth and do the right thing? If not us, then who? And so I think that's kind of what I'm passionate about these days, working with Southern Company, trying to do the right things from an energy policy standpoint, from a federal government policy standpoint. Just how to get the job done and grow those jobs and grow those personal incomes. And I think we can do it. I think it is inspirational to me, where we are. And it's such a stark backdrop when you look at the chaos in the world right now. You know, gee whiz, when you think about everything going on in the Middle East and all the ramifications of that. Another thing I like to say, energy security done appropriately breeds national security, and that will breed economic security. The stakes are too high for us not to do our best, and to settle for somebody trying to dumb down American aspirations. I reject that completely. Now, how do we do that? Okay. I'm going to structure this in really, I guess, 2 ways. One is when I go out and talk national energy policy, kind of my general speeches, it's all out there on the internet, so you can go YouTube it, or it's in printed form, or all that stuff. I'm going to do the first part of this idea of what's the right way to mobilize generation resources. So it's President Obama's all the above. In fact, the only company doing all the above in America today is Southern Company. Now, I will walk through how we're innovating around all the above. Then I want to turn to the notion of disruption, which is a fascinating notion to me, because I don't really believe in it. There is a potential for disruption in our industry. I think we get disrupted in a tactical sense, but I don't think we're disrupted in a strategic sense, and shame on us if we don't use disruption to succeed. We are not acted upon, we choose to act. So let me just kind of start on that. And then I'm going to go through that reasonably quickly, and then I would love to engage you all in some conversation about what's on your mind and what you'd love to argue about. And I especially love people who disagree. All right, so that would be great. Make, move, and sell. So make, generate electricity, nuclear, 21st century coal, natural gas, renewables, energy efficiency. Okay. We are leading the renaissance of nuclear in America. Vogtle 3 and 4, we're going to look back on it, and we will find that this mega project is the most successful large industrial enterprise ever undertaken in modern American history. I'll stop. The media would have you believe that it is behind schedule and over budget. Garbage. When we were originally ordered by the Public Utility Commission to build the first new nuclear facilities in America, we all thought that it would require about a 12% price increase to Georgia Power's customers. I can tell you, even with the settlement that we just announced with kind of a lawsuit between us and our consortium that's helping build the project now, even with two schedule changes, one was just a change in reflection of when we got the licenses, the other was in fact a delay. And with the cost that went up associated with those delays, what is always underreported are the benefits that we have been able to bring to that project. And in fact, with the benefits, they have overwhelmed the increased costs. So that now I am delighted to say that when Plant Vogtle was put into service based on current estimates, even with these schedule changes and even with these increased costs, the price increase to customers is not now 12%. It is more like 6.8%. The price burden to customers has actually come down. And this is for a project that kind of bricks and mortar is about $10 billion. Total capital cost to everybody is about, I don't know, 14, 15 billion. It takes 10 years to build. There's only a few people that can build these kind of things. People with scale, people with the highest level of financial integrity. If you're going to commit to nuclear, which we must do as a dominant solution in America, then we've got to have the highest level of financial integrity. We know that it takes 10 years. We've got to shorten down that time frame. The vagaries of the world's financial markets will require that you have the staying power to go through those choppy waters. Then you better be going good as an operator. This is no job for beginners. We've got to continue on nuclear. Look, I think ideas like SMRs and the next wave, kind of the cold fusion ideas, are great ideas to innovate around. But right now, with the kind of technology we're able to bring to bear with the Westinghouse AP1000 technology, 70% less pumps, valves, pipes, this is good stuff, and it is safe. We went through this. We started out with Fukushima, right? Very early in my career, Fukushima happened. Well, I woke up that morning, and it was my birthday, by the way. What a present that was. And we heard about the earthquake in Japan. And I called together my board on the phone and said, I don't know what's going on, but this is important. Pay attention. And then the tsunami hit. That night I was flying over to Europe to meet with ambassadors, one of the widely held companies in Europe and also in Asia. And I walked in the high building at noon the next morning. And this guy says, your stock's going to trade off 10% on Monday. We were able to mobilize Washington, the White House, the administration, Senate, House, regulators. And I think what you will find is that particularly with the Vogtle project, but more broadly, what we're doing makes sense. And I think what we're putting in place would have obviated a lot of the problems in Fukushima. For example, the technology is this passive technology, so that in the event of a real problem, the water just drops via Newton's law, gravity. You wouldn't have to pump it everywhere. It's not in a seismic sensitive area. It's not near a coastline. We've tested against floods and everything else. Look, this thing is going to be fabulous. We need to do more. We have a problem in America in the so-called organized markets. They are so-called organized markets. It's an experiment that I don't think works in the long run. You will never build a big capital asset like a nuke in those markets. price signals don't justify large capital investments. Nuclear, I could spend a lot more time on it. We need to develop it more. When you talk about vision and courage, takes a lot of vision and a boatload of courage to go forward with nuclear. We're doing it. We're going to be successful. It'll be the standard for America and really for the world in the decades to come. We need to continue. Coal, big deal. Okay. The United States, I said before, Saudi Arabia coal has a tremendous resource. When I think about our ability to take this resource and use it for American benefits, not only for jobs, but energy production here and around the world, we've got to take advantage of that. We can't turn our backs on coal. Yes, it's clear to me that regulations are forcing us to move away from that. If we're going to move away from that, we've got to do it in a manner that doesn't destroy the livelihoods of people along the way. My own experience, based on HAPS-MAC, it was HAPS-MAC back then, now it's MAX, I guess. We're having to shut down a bunch of coal. In Georgia, we're shutting down plant branch units 1 through 4. Oh, okay. The human consequence of that is enormous. That represented jobs, 600 jobs, somewhere around there at Blanche, 500, that were double otherwise what's available in that county, Putnam County, Georgia. And by shutting down that plant, we will remove tax base that represented 19% of otherwise the tax revenues associated with that county. What do you tell those people? What do you tell them when they want to continue a school system or pay for police or fire? What do you say? It can't just be, well, that's life. We've got to figure that out. I get what we're trying to do at EPA. I really do think that they have good intentions. They don't have the lens that's appropriate. Only Congress and only we as leaders of our business enterprise do. We must balance clean, safe, reliable, affordable. We have been the only company in America doing proprietary, robust research and development. And so we have worked hard to build technologies that will allow us to continue to use coal as a resource. We're deploying that technology in Mississippi. I have wonderful good news here recently, but we've had our bumps in the road. We've written off over $2 billion trying to make that thing come to fruition. I feel that we're on a real winning streak right now. The technical tests have been going great in startup. And yeah, we've taken a long time, and boy, we spent more money. We made a commitment to fix the cost to the folks in Mississippi. We've held our commitment. That's why we're taking it, with a bunch of write-offs. But I can tell you, this is a coal technology that will have a carbon footprint less than natural gas. We'll remove 65% of the CO2. It won't be a waste stream. It's going to be used in something called enhanced oil recovery. We'll take that CO2, push it in the ground, push out more domestic oil. Heaven forbid, we're going to take a resource that otherwise goes unused. We're going to produce 2 million more barrels of oil every year. We'll produce low price benefit of the citizens of Mississippi. Oh, and by the way, it's in a place where very little industry, very little economic activity happens, tax-based, high-paying jobs. Good for Mississippians, good for America. We need to understand how to export that technology. And so not only using it elsewhere in the United States, we'll see, but clearly, if we're going to do something with carbon, that becomes a national policy. This will be the first real commercial step that America has taken to do something about it. Also, I traveled with Ernie Moniz, Secretary of Energy, best energy secretary, in my opinion, the United States has ever had. And we are going to, we're pushing that technology elsewhere. Traveled with him to Istanbul, Turkey last year, and we're continuing a lot of conversations. You know, when I say energy security breeds national security, breeds economic security, imagine if you were here, not in beautiful Scottsdale, but in Warsaw, Poland, where most of your energy came from coal, will continue to come from coal. And when you use natural gas, you're buying your natural gas from where? Gazprom. And who's at the end of those pipes? Vladimir Putin. Have a nice day. They have a real need to use a technology like ours to make their lives better, to continue to use coal. And so we can do it in Eastern Europe, and we can do it in Serbia, Romania, China. We've struck 2 agreements there. they'll continue to use coal. Listen, we've got to figure out a way. We can't turn our back on that really important resource. Natural gas. So Southern Company has become an enormous user of natural gas. I think we're the third largest consumer of natural gas in the United States. This year, I think 48% of our energy will come from natural gas. Some years ago now, I guess I've been in my job 5 years, coming up on that anniversary. I think after the first year, I kind of laid some things out. You know, the weekend Wall Street Journal, they do a weekend interview. That interview was pretty well done. You know, you can argue about sometimes the way people write things up, but I always get chagrined between the way articles are written and what the headline writers write. The headline guy said, and look it up, it's in the, you can look it up, says the natural gas skeptic. Well, the whole thing was about all the above and everything else. Natural gas skeptic, here's my worry. In this headlong rush, only a few people can do nuclear. Coal is an enormous resource. If you're not doing coal, you're going to be doing gas. And man, it ain't just us doing gas because of the miracle of technology breakthroughs. When you talk about innovation and directional drilling and fracking, we're going to see an enormous shift, transportation fuels, industrial uses, energy consumption. And so what I'm telling folks is we have made a big shift. We just announced a merger with AGL Resources. I forget the total capital amount of that is. Equity value was $7.9 million. Enterprise value, $12 billion. Look, we're going to be moving a lot to natural gas because we know that renewables, while attractive, costs are coming down, everything else, they need load following type of generation. Here's what's interesting. Natural gas, 5 reasons you should be cautious about this big rush to natural gas. And please understand, I'm long that bet. I am doing that. So I'm saying it from the position of somebody that has intentionally bought those cards. Number one, we better understand long-term the environmental issues associated with this directional drilling, fracking, water, and everything else. And I think the big guys know how to do it pretty well, have been doing it for a long time. But I can tell you some of the smaller people haven't done that well, either from a water management standpoint or kind of a methane release standpoint. The second thing is really this idea of infrastructure. The whole bet around AGL Resources for us was a bet on infrastructure. Where the unconventional gas is, it is not the conventional gas used to be. And so therefore, we need to rethink how we're going to flow gas around America. This idea of build the pipe here recently that was rejected by the federal government, to me is crazy. We need to build lots more pipes. We need to build more infrastructure in order to support this wonderful country we live in. And we need to build not only think about what's going to happen when we reverse flows, but also new pipes to gather kind of an energy future that will grow. This is a huge issue to us. We need more infrastructure and not just pipes. We also need storage. Third issue, third largest consumer of natural gas on my own when we finally complete the deal with AGL Resources. I'll bet you we'll be the biggest in consumption, arguably the most important natural gas company in the United States. I'm 100% for exporting everything we can do, and not just in natural gas, in oil and in coal. If we have the resource and other people need the resource, let's take advantage of this point in time to create a better position on our balance of payments as a nation, to benefit people that otherwise here, because of regulations and everything else, find themselves rather. We should be able to market our resources anywhere in the world where there's a good market and support jobs here and take advantage of the folks that otherwise are getting damaged by our own domestic policies. Fourth is really understanding what's going to happen to price and volatility as we evaluate this shift in the demand curve. And I mentioned transportation and industrial consumption and our own industry consumption. And then fifth, there is really no good way right now to hedge long-term in long-term meaning like in a 20-year sense, the price and volatility of natural gas. We really need to get a better grasp on that. I can go deeper in that if you want. So that's my reason to be cautious on natural gas. I do, however, believe this. that as coal is coming under pressure, you're going to need more. The closest thing to baseload you can, gas isn't baseload, but combined cycle technologies, you want to get as much of that as you can. The other thing is, as renewables or intermittent resources, you're going to need more CTs. And so you're going to need to build peaking facilities to follow what otherwise is going on in the renewables market. So let's go to renewables. We're one of the biggest owners of solar in the United States. Ever since I got this job, I was very clear that I was not a big fan of wind. Get it? Big fan of wind? Come on, say with me. But, and that's only because the Southeast doesn't have much wind flow. Wind just doesn't have much application in the Southeast. Now, people are arguing with these new super tall, great big, you know, maybe it will. And we've looked offshore, off Savannah and other things, and maybe it will. But in a widespread sense, what makes sense for us is solar. And so we started down the road, and we are now one of the biggest solar companies in America. Central Station Solar has about double the economic value as does distributed solar, rooftop solar. What's interesting about renewables, and remember I'm saying is one of the biggest owners of solar in the United States, they are propped up. Well, we need to handle the intermittency issues. We can talk about distributed generation here in a minute. I'm all for distributed generation. If you want to put a solar panel on your rooftop, I have a business unit that will do that. We don't have a renewable portfolio standard. Georgia was named by the solar industry as the investor-owned utility of the year in 2014. Imagine that, the investor-owned utility year in the solar industry, and we don't have a renewable portfolio standard. See, I think those kinds of things are dumb ideas too. What we've got to do is let the market decide what's best for customers. Customers ultimately decide what's best for customers. We've got to do the right thing by customers all the time. If you don't do what's best for your customers, I always love the book Barbarians at the Gate. Remember that? It was the takeover and decimation, really, of RJR Nabisco. One of the great lessons I learned from that book was, if you don't run your business as well as you can, somebody else will. And so if we don't play offense, taking advantage of changes in technologies, changing in buying patterns and demographics, shame on us. We got to play offense. And so we're playing offense in the distributed generation space. But in general, what you must account for is the intermittency of these resources. Okay? Boom. Got it. Intermittency. Second, where these resources are good in big scale areas, especially wind, solar to a lesser extent, but there are no people. These resources inherently rely on long-term transmission electric infrastructure, and that is not the way you would sit around and design your system. I completely understand the value of long-haul transmission, but it is not the way you would do it. If you would do it perfectly, you would locate the generation resource near the load center. That's the way to create a secure system. Thirdly is, I take advantage of it like nobody's business. But it is based largely on tax law. I can't remember the name of the group, but a group in DC basically has said that the tax preference items on a per unit of energy delivered is 100 times what is available to oil, gas, coal, even 35 times what's available to nuclear. Okay, I take advantage of it, all right? It's bad policy. In my opinion, and this is going to something later, in my opinion, what we should do is comprehensive tax reform, equal out everything. Take away all the benefits on a prospective basis, and then move forward for the best solutions on an energy generation, customer delivery standpoint. But look, I think renewables are an important part of our future. I'm an enormous advocate. But we've got to understand, we've got to be real with each other, what they're good for and what they're not good for. And there's a whole lot of arguments going on around the United States about the value of the network. If you think you're going to run your house just with a solar panel, you're going to burn up all your engines and your HVAC and everything else. The value of the network must be accounted for when we think about putting these things into rates in a fair way, especially for the 46% that make less than $40,000 a year. Oh, and by the way, you need appropriate fuel charges for the backup generation. Now, people say maybe storage is the way to go. We can talk about storage here in a minute. But anyway, renewables, big deal. I'm all for renewables. Please understand. They have their place in part of the portfolio. Energy efficiency is the fifth one. So I've done nuclear, I've done 21st century coal, I've done gas, I've done renewables, now I'm doing energy efficiency. Energy efficiency does not mean use less. Garbage. Doesn't mean that. Here's what I want to do with energy efficiency. I want to make my product more efficient, cheaper, so that these families, you, can improve your life by using more. The families that are on a fixed energy budget that make less than $40,000 a year, you know what they want? It's almost like Maslow's hierarchy. They want for their children a better place to live, better food on the table, better medical care, better education. Simple stuff. When they're on a relatively fixed energy budget, everything we do has an impact on their quality of life. If I can deliver energy more efficiently, cheaper, they can use that energy, better place to live, etc., to make their life better. And that's what we're about. Energy policy in America today has the potential to be one of the greatest enablers to improve our standard of living and drive our economic engine. That's what I'm getting out of energy efficiency. I'm all for it. Now let me go to some kind of more cool, innovative things. Make, move, sell. I've spent a lot of time on make. And energy efficiency is a negative make, right? It's a negative resource. Move is pretty interesting. So I was CIO at one time, and the move thing is just fascinating to me. So everybody's been doing smart wire, smart grid before smart grid was cool. I forget how much we spent now, $1 billion doing smart grid. And one of the really cool things that we're able to do is ping the system, you guys know this, to where you get kind of now predictive signals, where systems are about to fail and you can take action before they fail. So your SAIDI and safety numbers. SAIDI is your duration of interruptions. Safety is your frequency of interruptions. So those statistics are coming down. And no kidding, smart grid works, our conditions are at about a 12-year low for duration and frequency of interruption. So that's wonderful stuff, good stuff. Data management is a fascinating issue. When you're pinging systems in milliseconds, trying to figure out where the faults may start to arise, there is an enormous challenge in data management. Then the thing was smart meters. And remember some years ago, everybody said, oh, smart meters are the gateway to the smart home. I never believed that when I was CIO, and I still don't believe it. I really think Nest thermostats and things like that are really going to be where we go. I'll get to that in a minute. But smart grids, the whole move thing, I think we're doing a lot. We'll continue to do better. Data management is a real skill we need to do better at in our industry. Let's go to sell, because that's fascinating. What's beyond the meter? Now, I grew up having, I guess I had 15, before I had this job, 15 different jobs inside this company in 30 years, and 6 different business units, all right? One of them was a competitive generation business, took me overseas and some other things, but also there were some parts of that business that were domestic. It was a utility services business. Remember when you'd go to Boston, for example, and you guarantee an office building, I'll split the savings with you if you let me put in this stuff, and I get to get half of your savings, and those things really died some ugly deaths. Some people are still trying to make money out of it. God bless them. Not for me. I do think, however, that there is a fascinating area that is emerging here. I think we've handed these things out at your tables. Okay, so Bronze, you see these things? Take a look at this. This is pretty interesting stuff. I have a general theme as I talk to people or try and lead an organization of what's in house. I've mentioned that to you before. Innovation is not a what, it's a how. And one of the things I've been fascinated with is I love to say we're the only company in America doing proprietary robust research and development. Oh yeah, well what about EPRI? Well, EPRI isn't proprietary. It's like a research co-op. And I love EPRI. I've been vice chair of EPRI. The former CEO of EPRI was Dr. Steven Specker, brilliant guy. As soon as he retired, I got him on the Southern Company board. Please understand, I love equity. It's not edgy enough. Whenever you have a co-op and you get a lot of people around the table, it tends to get real vanilla. I'm not into vanilla. So let's think about innovation as a how. Brief commercial on diversity. This is important. When we think about diversity as a cultural value, what you're really after is not so much race and gender. Those are the obvious differences we have, right? Like, I bet you're a woman. Or we know people of color because you can see them, right? That ain't what I mean. When I talk about the vision and courage necessary to look around the corners of the future and try to skate to where the puck is going to be, what I need is a difference in perspective, skill, background, experience. How am I going to get there? One of the reasons I love it when people argue with me, when I think about my management team and how I try to cultivate a culture inside the Southern Company Management Council. If everybody was like me, if you were just like me, would I need you? No, I got me, right? What I want are people that will engage in constructive destruction, creative destruction. I want people that will attack. If I drew a picture of Southern Company people, I would say a big circle, and it's a giant, big kind of circle with a little pie slice in it. Inside the circle is people that know how to make, move, and sell better than anybody. Our fossil hydro fleet was less than 1% with industry averages of over 6%. Our customer satisfaction ratings were the top 4 companies in the United States last year. Our safety numbers are getting better every year. We're the greatest company in the world, right? No. We can always be better. Anybody, I love the New England Patriots. They ultimately lost the Super Bowl. Remember they went on that run where they won every game up until the Super Bowl? I love looking at their practice pictures because when they take their pads off, they were all wearing T-shirts, and the T-shirt said "Humble Pie." You can always be better, me included. How do you turn on an organization that's been so successful like Southern Company, one of 2 companies been most admired the last 6 years in a row? We do it perfectly. What are you talking about? If you were the guy that said, wait a minute, we can do better. Why don't we do it this way? Have you ever thought about that? And the guys around you, what do they say to you? Shut up. I know how to do it. Look how good I am. Successful people very often are very comfortable in their success. One of the greatest harbingers of future failure is past success. Industrial landscape is littered with it. How do you create an environment where you allow for and embrace creative destruction? It's through diversity. And it's not just race and gender, it's sexual orientation, it's religion, it's income, it's land of natural origin, and it's a million different facets that you can't see by looking at people. I don't want to pick on you all. Don't act by thinking about diversity in the obvious measures. Diversity ultimately is an outcome that allows you to increase your cultural bandwidth. And that's what I'm after in this whole innovation thing. And so what we did, y'all have heard of X Prize? X Prize? You know, it's a big funded thing where they solve big problems like commercial space flight and all this stuff. So marketing, man, not X Prize, it's So Prize. And what I did was engage the employees of Southern Company, all 26,000 of us, in 2 things. The first was to say, let's have an argument about what 2025 is going to look like. And I put something out there, a straw man, about what the future would be like. Am I right? Heck no. You know I'm wrong. But it was fun to let everybody shoot at it. We used a technology called MindJet, which is used in places like Microsoft and Cisco and a variety of places, where you can actually do crowdsourcing and everybody argues and fights and we get comments and everybody can see what everybody else is saying. And I said, okay, great. We finished the first process. Everybody thought about the future. And I said, you know what? Everybody's picture here is relevant. There is no right picture of the future. And in fact, what I'm going to do now is open up a competition to allow you to bid on strategies that will make us thrive. not just survive, in this 2025. And if you want to bid to your own future, that's fine. Don't rely on mine. I'm trying to increase the bandwidth, remember. And if you're successful up to a point, we'll give each individual in a team, they form teams. It was really fun. It's like, I don't watch this stuff. Survivor, where they join teams and all that stuff. So they would join teams and say, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. There were over 1,000 ideas submitted, where we would pay people up to a point. I think the top 20 got, you remember this. Do you remember this? I forget. $25,000. The finalists, we said there would be 5. We picked 6, $75,000 each. So that was pretty good stuff. For the finalists, we made it do something like Shark Tank. We actually televised them pitching their ideas, their financial models and everything else. Came up with 6 ideas. 6 ideas real quickly. I'm going to go through 3 of them, but then I want to spend time on the other 3. I'm going to talk about them in a single lump. The 3 that were kind of far out. Oh wait, one's not far out. One was UAVs. Okay. UAVs. We had a fatality in Alabama in 2014. Somebody inspecting a transmission line, and so the obvious kind of rejoinder to that was, boy, let's use UAVs. Well, now we're finding ways to use UAVs in ways you never thought of. We have our own private telecom network called Southern Link. It actually withstood Hurricane Katrina and was up when everything else was down. But if you've ever looked at one of those radio towers, it looks like a rat's nest up there, doesn't it? And in fact, it's been a completely deregulated enterprise to put stuff up there. People use contractors, AT&T and all these others, and they don't even know what's up there. You can use UAVs now to do a Google Earth of radio towers. What do you think that's worth? That's pretty cool, isn't it? Anyway, UAVs is one of the things we're looking at in a variety of ways. You can measure coal piles, do inspections of plants much more efficiently, way more than just replacing an inspection regime on transmission lines. Second idea, air. Well, I know EPA is all over air, and I think the Clean Air Act is one of the great pieces of legislation in America. I think it's wonderful. But I have been saying now for some time, way before I had this job, that I think the marginal cost to the marginal benefit of air is a little questionable when we think about the macro impact to the United States economy. I think the bigger issue might be water. It certainly is a global issue that there's thought. And so I've got some guys working on water. Well, one of the winners of the final 6 was an idea of a guy in Georgia. Yeah, water everywhere. And his idea was this. It's pretty fascinating stuff. Georgia is the only state in the United States whose water originates solely within its state boundaries. It's the only one in the United States. And at one time they had a drought. Now we got too much water. I mean, the climate changes all the time. But they don't have a good reservoir system. And so it becomes an economic development issue, it's an environmental issue, and it's an issue that we can help. Desalinization plants, perhaps off the coast of Georgia, are great to solve an environmental and economic development issue. And oh, and by the way, they use a boatload of electricity. Isn't that wonderful? So with water, oh, hydrogen. I always love to go places that, you know, I'm not. So I go to the Aspen Ideas Festival. I really step out of the echo chamber. I go there every year, so I think I'm one of the big sponsors of the Aspen Ideas Festival. And I was on a stage extolling the virtue of electric transportation. And I did my thing. I was really happy about it. Walk off the stage, and this guy comes up behind me, Mr. Toyota. Now, I didn't know who he was. Well, he happened to be the CEO of Toyota. And they've gone away from electric transportation, and they are now doing hydrogen fuel cell transportation. And you want to know something? An electric generating facility, rather than shut them down when they're not being used even during, you know, parts of the day or they're out of a dispatch cycle, you can modify them kind of slightly to manufacture hydrogen. It's another fuel hedge. What if we could take coal and make hydrogen out of it? I wonder if that helps in the future. Anyway, so one of the things we're thinking about longer term is, should we be in the hydrogen business? That's kind of interesting. Okay, those are the 3 ideas that are a little far out, but they're kind of fun to think about. And we're putting real money behind them. real people working on, and we're seeing we can invent the future. But here's the other three, and let me just kind of do it simply. It's called So Connected. 3 different ideas we smashed together. And the idea is essentially this. Distributed generation is kind of a fun thing to think about. Oh, solar powering rooftop, that's kind of a fun thing to think about. But we're missing the point. What we're missing is distributed infrastructure. Our business has always been, we're really good managing infrastructure, generating plant, transmission line, distribution line, Think about taking make, move, and sell, and now let's put it beyond the meter. So what does that look like? Could be a solar panel, could be a fuel cell, could be a storage device. We're working with Tesla on thinking about how to array storage devices in a residence, in a commercial setting, in an industrial setting. And maybe you have electric vehicle transportation charging infrastructure, just a plug. And maybe we have natural gas charging infrastructure in a commercial setting. Was that me? That was
me. Tom, can I suggest that we move into lunch and that you take the Q&A as they get their lunch? It's in the next program.
okay.
And people are so wrapped. It'll be terrible to stop this conversation.
Okay. You want to stop right now, or do you want to come to a conclusion?
It's up to you.
Let me go 10 more minutes, then we'll move. Is that okay? Maybe 10 minutes. We just finished the thought of distributed infrastructure. Here's the idea. So, smart HVAC. There's a whole combined heat and power. There's a whole lot of things we can do. Here's something else. We've been involved with Nest. I think we're the largest deployer of Nest technologies in the United States. Georgia Power itself, I think, is giving away 10,000 Nest thermostats, giving it away. And their idea is to use less electricity, isn't it? That sounds kind of stupid, doesn't it? Well, here's what we're doing. We're working with Nest, not to think about Nest as an adaptive thermostat. You know what, everybody knows Nest? I always love to use the model of Bill Gates' house. You walk at Bill Gates' house, anybody ever done that? He has pictures on the wall. They do tours and stuff, it's crazy. Pictures on the wall, and you walk in there, Bill Gates walks in, there are pictures of like what Bill Gates likes, like his dog. I mean, I don't know. Melinda Gates walks in, there are pictures that Melinda Gates likes, you know, like her kids. And then they both walk in the house, there are pictures Melinda likes. But here's the deal. What if the Nest thermostat became not an adaptive thermostat that would recognize your patterns and do what happens in the Gates house from a picture standpoint, but rather would wrap together the ubiquity of smart chips. It's going to be everywhere. Any asset in your house can have a smart chip, probably it's worth $100 or more. And the Nest thermostat will be adaptive to manage, as a server would, the Internet of Things. We're working with Nest to get that done. We're also working with Google to create a system that will tie together all of these things. It's fascinating stuff. It feels threatening, but here's my view, that especially where I think about natural interest of displacing nasty foreign oil, when I think about the ability for us to deliver energy to make people's lives better, these kinds of solutions are going to be paramount. And what we will be, as we did with the iPhone and as we have done with so many things in the IT space, inventing our future. I am not acted upon. I am playing offense. I am not letting regulators tell me how to run an extremely, arguably the most important part of our national infrastructure. And I think we can do this with win-win solutions. I think we can make America better. And I think not only can we forestall the idea of dumbing down American aspirations, I think we can actually increase American aspirations. I think these things are so powerful. Again, excuse the pun. This is great stuff, and these are things we can do. Now, you want to go to lunch? And then we'll do Q&A there?
Q&A there. Let's give Tom a standing ovation. Lunch is next door where it was yesterday.
Yeah.
I am working on a number of pilot projects that are breaking up silos, work on scan reduction, work on new type of innovation, creating new systems. And one of the things that kind of occurred to me, and is the built environment. We're treating it kind of differently with the EPA and the DOE. We've got STAR, and we have a different approaches like the UTCC, how to approach energy ratings for those things. And I'm just curious as to like, crystal ball, like, do we know where we're going to go over the next few years on that? Because I mean, that's really going to affect like home builders and stuff in our territory, and how we're going to make our own internal ratings and programs and stuff like that.
So I don't think there's going to be any major dramatic
Yeah.
The alternatives league doesn't seem to have really got traction, but they have useful ideas. I actually worked on it.
Hello, Livestream. We are moving to the lunchroom. Stick with me a second. The lunchroom. Where are we setting up? Where are we setting up? These are the questions. These are the questions that plague and souls. Maybe right here? No. Maybe I'll just put you guys on the floor.
Good for you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just literally gonna set this up right here. I'm assuming he's gonna be behind me, like right here, ish. Okay, cool. Yeah. Ledger. What? Oh, hemorrhaging left and right. All right. Well, I just want to throw a quick plug. If any of you have questions or Tom Fanning, I recommend that you tweet them to Llewellyn King 2, and I will ask them on your behalf. So yeah, you should do that.
So where's the Q&A number? Right in here?
Theoretically, I have just as little than I do.
Oh, absolutely. How are you? So where are you based?
I'm Swedish,
I understand that.
but I'm based in Stockholm.
In Stockholm, okay,
Yeah.
so you're actually not only Swedish, but you're actually from Sweden.
Yeah.
Not the same thing though. So you have to hear where you're from. It means where were you born or something.
Okay. I'm born, but I live in Finland. About my fourth and
How brings you here?
last. Actually, I wanted to, and then I have got a feeling for the American discussion. I do a lot of work within the EU. Spend a lot of time in Brussels. It kind of has closed things. It's a bit interesting that way.
Well, I think America has trouble understanding how the EU works. Yes, because outsiders do federal, state things.
Yeah, but I mean, it's a bit sad. I lived 2 years in Alaska, so I'm, kind of easy for me. But some influences from the US.
Sure.
But it's a bit sad because we talked about net meat.
Yes.
We hemorrhage all of our viewers when we
Yeah, right. My bad.
And I was saying, well, we should look at Arizona and
They're gonna
Hawaii.
He's just
European politicians are not interested in the US.
Okay, well, only one other person. Well, two other people. Because I'm one of them. I have going.
Okay, good.
So there's two other people watching right now, down from like 15 when
I'm a professor in
Well,
economics.
is there
Oh, good.
safety between
Well, I'll tell you the one thing.
I told
we
them to
have
be continued. And I told them.
somewhat beyond that.
Okay.
The
That's all
difference.
you
We
can
have
do.
all these. 50
I mean, if it was a more advanced,
Very
like, if it was like the other more advanced YouTube live streaming thing, you can like put in like graphics, and, like, oh, like, you know, this part's going up, this part's going up, which I want to do eventually when we get it. We actually plan these things out a little bit in advance.
At the same time in
I
the same
think
country.
actually what you've
in
done
different
so
states.
far is
And,
remarkable.
do you know that
Yeah, no, it's exciting.
For first try.
Yeah, first go around.
Yeah.
They did a
Yeah.
study 20 years before this country.
Supposedly know stuff.
Formed region and non-reformed.
We have been.
It's pretty amazing what they discover. It's not at all what you
There's a
expect.
region for Tokyo, a region for China.
It's this live experiment that we can
So this is really,
So on the-
that this is kind of a, it's
And,
kind of
I mean, that's from Mexico. And you could learn, but a lot of the time we're just.
Well, do you have anything to say to our live streamers?
This is Glenn King. I'm
Where
here
would you like
at
to
the
sit?
Other Utility Fortnightly Conference, and what an extraordinarily interesting conference with such gifted people giving such interesting views that affect all of us. Because if we have electricity, we have a future. Without it, we're in all shape. I know that because I grew up in Africa, often without it. You know, it's not much fun reading with a candle. Much nicer having electric light. Cheers.
What's up? All right. Well, that was Lalon. We will be back in short order.
I mean, the Germans kind of also in the industry.
Well, sure. And, that's a nice thing. Cheap gas
is really making. China's one thing, but if you move the US, so
Yeah, but the Germany is not only cheap gas, because if you look at price evolution, the US price, if you have a US price, you know, every state have their, on average, it has been fairly flat, whereas the German price is gone up.
well, my understanding, that's about what the Germans secondhand is that Germany, a lot of the price increases and not so much to industrial.
To industry, it's not true. The energy intensive industry has been exempted,
Really? Okay.
but a large part of the manufacturing, for example, textile industry, has been because they don't. Yeah. So it's a truth, but
So some industries are different.
yeah. And,
In Japan, it's almost the opposite. To some extent, that may be the reason why they're not so excited about the nuclear potential.
yeah.
So it didn't make a big difference. In industry,
It's a bit interesting because you would see after Fukushima, the Germans reacted immediately and we're closing down. But in Sweden and Finland, we connected to jobs, to manufacturing industry in cheap electricity. So the discussion there was a lot more low key. We have to learn from Fukushima, so we don't immediately have to close down the plant. And then I find that the unions are very pro-nuclear.
yes,
For the job.
here too. You know, I had a European regulator who explained to me the tipping point issue in Germany was Chernobyl happened. The European regulators and politicians and the nuclear industry said, well, because of the Russian, but also because they had made a change. And we all changed, so we got that part, no release. So we promise. So I think a lot of people felt frustrated and upset, and that's what drove the firm on the edge in Germany. Maybe some other countries.
I think so too. But Germany has all the time, you know, so they just need it.
Very much. So I think these are
Yeah, we have 4 months earlier. When he was saying that for renewables, the renewables have a problem.
I always suspect that
Renewables.
I wasn't going to treat other benefits.
So that's not what we need. Yeah.
so
Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go to Q&A because Tom has to fly to Washington.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Huh?
You guys have.
We've got a question there, but I'll leave it to you to select your
I'll leave all this junk here. Hold on. Yeah, this thing, in fact, I think it's probably too loud. All right. Yes, sir.
Yeah. I'm Mats Nilsson. I'm Swedish, but I live in Finland half of the time. And you started off really early saying that we can't invest in nuclear because we can't invest
on price signals.
No, I didn't say that. No. Keep going.
Okay,
I'll clear it up.
okay. But because it depends, they're investing in two different plans on
Yes.
price signals. But if that was not what you said, that's what I heard.
Oh, you mean in a deregulated environment? Yes. Will you just go through that?
Well, I just, yeah, because it sounded like you didn't believe in price signals, and I would have asked you that.
Perfect. I got it.
Don't you believe it because of politics, or are you genuinely suspicious of markets? But if I misunderstood you, then
No, Max, I'm sorry. Okay. You are correct. I did say something like that. And let me kind of expand on it a little bit more. So I come from a finance background, right? And one of the things we know from finance is that value is a function of risk and return, right? And one of the things that you all recognize when you evaluate risk and return is kind of, if you're going to invest a capital asset that requires a 60-year life, what is the risk and return of that? Okay. What's good about nuclear is it's got a very high capital cost but very cheap energy. And in an integrated regulated market, when that asset is finally put into service, I know that I have a long-term price signal. As long as the plant is alive, it's called return on return of net committed capital. In other words, you put the plant in, say it's $100, and you depreciate over 60 years. So every year you depreciate a 60th of it, you earn a return on the undepreciated balance. That's return on, and return of is just that you get a depreciation charge every year. That's what they call revenue requirements. And it's a very stable signal that gives you great assurance on recovering the value of that asset. In a so-called organized market, what you're relying on is a price signal sent from a market that typically is derived from gas generation. That's typically the way it is in the United States anyway. And people are trying to create longer term signals, but the longest signal that I'm kind of aware of that is in widespread use is something like 3 years. Now let's think about the risk return of advancing a nuclear asset in a so-called organized market. So I'm going to take 10 years to build an asset with no concept of rate base. In Georgia, the Georgia Commission, in their wisdom, has solved the problem of a 10-year deal. So much cash flow at risk, they put in place something called CWIP, construction work in progress. We essentially earn a cash return as we go through the construction process. No such thing exists. So from a construction process standpoint, my sense is in an organized market, there being no signal that is equivalent to CWIP, you would take enormous credit risk during construction. 1. 2, now that we go into operation, how does a nuclear plant make its money? Well, let's just look at Exelon. Chris Crane is a dear friend of mine. We get along great. When you talk about two completely polar opposite companies, Southern Company and Exelon, they are just the opposites. I love Chris Crane. He's a brilliant guy. He's got a very tough set of cards to play. Because what he's got is a long-term asset in a short-term revenue market. So how do I finance long-term assets? Business school would tell you, you finance long-term assets with long-term liabilities. Common equity is essentially perpetual, and then it's as perpetual as you want it to be. And then you finance it with long-term debt, and there's a concept called duration. The simpler concept is average life. So if I have a 60-year asset, it depreciates over time. The average life of the asset is, I don't know, 25 years. So what you want to do is sell bonds that essentially are equivalent in their average life to the average life of the asset. And I'm oversimplifying. The more elegant concept is duration, which is a time weighted cash flow concept. But average life gets you to the same spot. So I need bonds that are 25 years long, right? On the average, some longer, some shorter. Everybody got that? Now, let's think about this. If I'm having liabilities that on the average are either perpetual equity or debt, 25 years long, and my longest capacity price is 3 years, and after that, it's variable dependent upon the market. And I'm just dealing with capacity prices now, not energy. Then there is an enormous mismatch. Imagine if you were buying a house and everything you did was at its long as you're buying a house for, and heck, we don't buy, how long do we live in houses? 9 years, 10 years? But if you had to do it all with day ahead, just to be goofy, day ahead capital, wouldn't that be scary? It'd be terrifying. There is a risk premium that exists that would compensate you for taking that risk. But the risk premium is so far out of the market compared to what somebody will commit to do, nobody will pay that premium in order to build a long-term asset in a short-term revenue market. They won't do it. Chris Crane is saddled with a market now that's being buffeted by wind, right? Where he's getting energy prices that are so cheap. Here's the energy equation. He produces energy, and I would say on the average, nuclear energy is the equivalent of $1 per million BTU. And if at times, see Texas overnight, if prices per hour get even negative, which we have seen, there is no price that compensates him even for the energy. And while it may be the best choice in the world to preserve nuclear, if the energy charge doesn't compensate him in a fair way for the price of his energy coming out of the plant, and also contribute to the long-term capital charge associated with building his asset, he's in very tough shape. And that's why you hear so much in the nuclear space, in the so-called organized markets, of having to shut down. Fitzpatrick is a recent example. There's so many examples right now. The nuclear industry is threatened by its survivability, even though from a portfolio standpoint, it may be some of our longest, most attractive assets in America. And while prices are cheap right now, we know that things change over time. That's why you do a portfolio. Gas may be attractive today, maybe coal tomorrow, maybe nuclear in the future. You've got to keep them all alive for a long period of time in order to let the portfolio work. You can't do that when he's trying to run a company and he gets underwater because of short-term perturbations in the so-called organized markets. So yes, I did say that. Do you want to argue that a little bit?
I just see the things. They're investing on only energy, only prices, no capacity market or anything. They're doing investment. And I guess they trust the market more, and maybe they have more stable conditions than you have. I don't know. But
this is a competition. You know, Max, we ought to chat. This would be a fun chat to have, because I said this on TV before. I said this on CNBC not that long. After Fukushima, Switzerland shut down all their nukes, and Germany's getting away from nukes, and the whole carbon regime that's been trying to put in place in Europe. And I hope I don't offend you, but I love the dialogue. I really do. But I have said before, if America wants to choose its energy policy, look at Europe and do the opposite. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, as you talked about your solar, isn't most of the solar though owned by Southern Power?
Yeah, sure. Well, no, just the facts are Southern Power owns, until this year, has owned almost all the solar outside, and mostly in the great solar resource areas. So, yeah, out here, California, right? Georgia owns what's in Georgia. There was a solicitation process in Georgia. Southern Power picked up a bunch of that.
As far as distributed, as far as rooftop, Full Power spent, I think, $380,000 to work against the ballot initiative that was going to promote rooftop solar. How do you square that with?
They're not against rooftop solar at all, but therefore, that whole ballot initiative really says, are we not gonna do it the right way? What are the design characteristics of rooftop solar that make sense to me?
That's an industry supporting outlet. Right.
It's, the companies in Florida, so the Nextera, Tika, Gulf, Duke. So the design criteria for rooftop solar to me is just a matter of fairness. It has nothing more than that. And it really recognizes three things. Number one, if you're gonna put a generating resource on your roof, we're delighted to do it. We do it in Georgia. Great, I'm all for it. What's the price that you should get paid? Is it a full retail price? No. But now you're getting compensated for things like distribution and a variety of other things. And what if you don't need the capacity? So the concept that we use in Georgia that I think is the appropriate concept is avoided cost. With the value of the capacity, and right now Georgia has too much capacity, so it doesn't need new generation. So they kind of figure out what year in which the next capacity needs, what's the value of capacity in that year, discounted back to the current period. So number one, avoided cost of the revenue. Number two, there should be a fair charge for the use of distribution. What do you do when the sun doesn't shine? And so you've got to rely on the distribution network in order to deliver the power that now you need when the sun doesn't shine. Also, there is a wonderful energy sink characteristic of the distribution network that stabilizes what is otherwise a variable kind of issue you would have to have if all you had was solar in a house with nothing around it. Third thing, obviously, I think nobody would dispute this, is if you're gonna use something else when the sun doesn't shine, you should pay for it. So if you're getting gas-fired generation or nuclear or whatever it is at night, you should pay for the backup generation. If you have the right capacity value for the revenue source, if you pay a fair charge for the distribution network, if you pay backup generation when the thing doesn't work, that's a fair charge, and we're all for it.
I'm just saying, one of the issues is supported by quote unquote consumer advocates. That'll be together by the industry who is supporting the industry, which is charged for.
Yeah, I'm supporting exactly what I just said.
I have many more questions, but I'll probably have people's mouths on.
We'll come back, yeah, whatever. Thank you for that. Appreciate it. And listen, please understand, distributed generation, I can remember people, oh, it's gonna disrupt everything. No. Distributed infrastructure is really a cool idea. Yeah, I think about a military base. You know, there's a national DOD, there's actually two initiatives in the DOD. One is to create separate buildings in time of a national emergency, and then they have kind of a national renewables imperative. And we've been the clear leader out of the box in the United States, putting all kinds of renewables, particularly solar in the Southeast. That's what makes sense. But also you get the stuff like microgrids and a variety of other things. If that makes sense, I want to play. If customers want something to sell, as long as it's fair to other customers, I want to sell it. I'm going to import everything. Please understand. If you want a blue Model T, I want to sell you a blue Model T. And if you want to have a pond in your backyard and you want to have a submarine there, I want to sell you the submarine. I want to do anything that customers want, so long as it's fair to other customers. I want to play offense everywhere. Even better, when we went to these goofy devices, I am picking on you so much, I really don't mean to. But these things, 10 years ago, you didn't know you needed one. What I want to do is inject what you need. And I'm in a better position to know than you will be. You know what? Me failing to do that will mean somebody else will do it and they'll capture market share. Next question. Yes, sir.
Steve Hines again.
Hello, Steve.
I worked with the FCC and the FTC back at the dawn of the broadband era.
Yes.
And had worked with the EPA in this time. One of the things I couldn't help but notice was that these agencies were 4 or 5 or 6 years behind technology and the thinking of the companies they regulate. How is it possible for including a federal agency, to tell you which technology will emerge when they're 5 or 6 years behind the time.
That was really a statement, not a question.
Okay.
But, no, I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more with your statement. You know, and that's really, it's a fascinating thing. So I am very deep right now in cyber and physical terrorism. It's what I did Monday, it's what I did over the weekend in Paris, it's what I did Monday and Tuesday in DC. I flew here, for this, I'm flying back tonight. We're doing Grid X3, the largest kind of disaster work in American history. It's actually going on today with the really culminates tomorrow. And like I said, I chair the ESCC, we'll leave that tomorrow. I am fascinated with that. It's the same concept. When you think about the bad guys that are trying to take our American way of life down, it is all about trying to stage where the puck will be. And when you think about cyber terrorism, it is all about the bad guys always trying to invent ways to get us. There is no Maginot Line that we can create that will keep the bad guys out, because the threat always changes. The bad guys are always thinking about new ways to get around whatever door exists, and through the roof and the ceiling and the floor and everything else. You know, I was talking with Lou Allen. See that chandelier right there? I love to do unconventional thinking, and I had this guy, he's just fascinating, Stratfor, and now I can't remember, Peter Zihan. Stratfor is a company that does war games for the United States government. They actually, lead the whole setups and execution of war games. And Zihan left them, he was with them, left them, and now he's Zihan and Associates or something. And he's written this cool book recently. He's come out with his latest cool book was The Accidental Superpower, and it's written about the United States. And one of his theories, he does some really interesting stuff, and he talks about the demographics of younger nations and how that is really the best predictor of future economic growth. And people that are getting older and not enough young people to support, currently productive people that are getting older and become less productive is really a great indicator of where their economic growth is going to be. Thankfully, we're in good shape there. Historically, another big thing is the geopolitics of our oceans. Having the Atlantic on one side and the Pacific on others has allowed us a sandbox, if you will, in which we can thrive. Again, I talked about Poland. Look at Poland's kind of history. They're on this beautiful plain, but it's between Europe and Asia. And the plain has no natural barrier. And so they've had a really tough time of it. Interestingly, when I look at that chandelier and say we're the bulb that's hanging off the bottom, cyber warfare knows no geographics. In other words, the oceans don't matter anymore. And all of a sudden, when we think about the threats that traditionally have been held out to people from Poland, and people, a billion other examples, I just used them. That's kind of what cyber terrorism looks like. Now, you asked a question about technology, FTC, and everything else. That to me is a good metaphor for technology change. Whether it's in telecom, whether it's in energy, you name it. And in fact, a really fascinating thing. So there's a recommendation that's in the White House right now, and there's some give and take about how it's going to eventually evolve. But at least what's recommended to the president right now is I will chair a group called the SIEC, whatever that stands for. It's put forth by a group called NIAC, National Infrastructure Advisory Council, that historically has been around for 40 years, reports to the president. And what they will do is anoint a lifeline sector. The lifeline sector will be electricity, finance, telecom, transportation, and water. And they will give a special priority to those sectors in terms of enabling either regulatory or legislative provisions that will allow us to either prevent or respond to emergencies better. And I hope that, there's some media here, don't say this, but if Sony got attacked, who cares? Now, people from Sony care and all that. But if your lights go out, it's a bad day in America. And so we really should think about, as a priority,
these lifeline sectors. You could also include more oil and gas, and there's a variety of others, but that's what they kind of come up with, these five. And when I think about that, even just thinking about, so go to your point, what is telecom, for heaven's sakes? Tell me, what's telecom? Is it Sprint? AT&T? Is it texting? What is it? Transportation? What is that? Is it railroads? Is it airlines? Is it trucking? Is it watercraft? Holy smokes. Technology will always move faster than we will. Always. And so what I try to operate from in dealing with government is, what's the right principle? And the principle should be with this SIEC, I think it's a Senior Infrastructure Executive Committee. I don't know, something like that. Is to allow, if you think about, let me just draw you a picture again in the air. If you think about where these issues arise, there is a whole array of letter agencies in the government, right? So it's Homeland Security, it's DOD, it's DOE in my case, it's FTC, it's just go all the way across, CIA, NSA, blah, 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 blah. Government agencies, all of them have an interest in keeping us safe or doing the right thing by policy, but they must be harmonized. When I think about who are they regulating, it's private industry, right? And I called out what I think is the lifeline sector, at least by this NIAC report, finance, telecom, transportation, water, and electricity. Okay, that's here. Believe it or not, there's 16 of them. And it was fascinating. You'd be very proud of your government. You never hear stuff like this. Again, I don't want this widely reported, but what the heck. When Saturday, Homeland Security had us all weigh in on the state of the United States following parents. Are you seeing any threat? We have a whole network in which to evaluate. And then we couple that with the intelligence community and we try to assess threat. There is a plan that people weigh in on that assess the level of the threat and what's being done and are we doing the right things. Don't buy the idea there's not a plan. Don't buy the idea that we're so disorganized we have nothing, we don't know what we're doing. That's just dead wrong. The United States government was working beautifully over the weekend. They were involving us. I got involved right at 5 o'clock Friday evening and stayed through the weekend making sure that everything was going the right way. They were doing a dynamite job. So give these people credit, okay? But the issue you raise is the most salient issue. If that's the threat of terrorism, if that's a threat or opportunity of technology change, there is no way you can sit here and build kind of a determinative policy. The policy by its nature must be options-based, fluid. It must be designed to accept market change. In the case of this SIEC, well, the idea between this collaboration of the federal government and industry owns 80% of the critical infrastructure in America, and therefore let industry tell the government what to do, not the government tell industry what to do. The industry must be the pitcher. The federal government must be the catcher. And unfortunately, the way we run our shop, so many days it's the opposite. That's what we have to fix. Okay? Let me throw two more issues out there that we all recognize and we never think about, or at least a lot of people don't. One is state and local governments. In any response to any issue, don't forget about the boots on the ground. In any response to technology issues, don't forget there's a consumer out there, or there's somebody, in our case, 46% making less than $40,000 a year, that for all the wonderful kind of high-level purpose, somebody has to live with a result, and they may not have a choice in terms of their economic reality. We've got to think about those people. Every time we think about policy, I want a face on that policy. It's going to have an event. Last thing, international. Okay. The United States is not an island, so I chair the Atlanta Federal Reserve Bank. Vice chair of the conference chair is a big thing. The big Fed has two directives from Congress, one of which deals with economic growth, one of which deals with unemployment levels, and one of which deals with inflation. Those are domestic statistics. You're from Finland or Sweden or whatever you want. Boom. There is, yeah, but here's the point. The United States is not on an island. The days of the United States calling the tunes on economic policy around the world are gone. We can't evaluate United States policy as if we're the only people on the earth. How do we create policy that's robust enough, resilient enough to withstand what's going on in Europe, in Asia? You can't just say, oh, I'll do this here and everything's going to be fine. And you know the classic issue you deal with right now, just monetary policy is, if we raise interest rates, then what happens to the value of our currency? It probably rises. And if we rise the value of our currency, what happens to our ability to export? It probably diminishes. And what happens to our ability to grow the economy? It probably also diminishes. So these are the issues people are wrestling with. The Fed has no direction from Congress to deal with currency. And yet, we know any action taken domestically, given the context of the worldwide economy, will have an enormous impact. You've got to take those things into account.
Tom, I think one more, we should send you to Washington.
That's not Ken Johnson.
Hey, Ken.
Our utility is about 1 million electric customers. And I know there are representatives from other utilities of similar size here, and we're dotted across the country. I wanted to ask what you think the industry for utilities our size looks like 10 years from now, when you have increasing costs in delivering your commodity while facing flat load growth, minimal revenue growth. What advice do you have for utilities of this size to sort of weather this transformation and potentially blossom in these opportunities that are presented to utilities of our size over the course of the next 10 years?
I think it's very similar. Yeah, thanks for that. I think it's very similar to kind of what Southern Company's dealing with. We'll have 9 million customers at the end of this merger with them. And we're big, and we'll be 50 billion in market cap and all that stuff. There are awesome economies of scale. What I'm afraid our industry lost its way in some time ago is we abdicated the ability to play offense in things like research and development and inventing the future, where so much innovation occurred in the IT space and in other spaces. When we advocate understanding the big picture of what makes America great, one of the things that makes America great is our resources. How can we best use our resources in a global sense, right? When we lose our way in terms of allowing other people to dictate to us what the future will look like, then in fact you are giving away, or you're compromising, you're diminishing in any respect your ability to survive as a company. Now here's I think sometimes there's a little bit of a dire tone behind your question that I would not mind. In fact, I would reject. It is the thing that you're going to be flat or diminishing or whatever. Let me go back to my argument about energy efficiency. Did you know, I think I got this right, $10 billion, my corporate comm guy, I think this is right. Since 1995, 80% of growth in energy has come in electricity. And why? It's by all these goofy devices, right? It's all this stuff. And you want to know something that's cool? Yeah, there's been all sorts of energy efficiency developed. You get more efficient houses and more efficient this and that and all that. Yeah, I get that. That's great. We see that too. How many of you guys use Netflix? Okay, a few. All you young people. I hate young people. I used to be young. My oldest son is 26, he'll be 27 in January. He uses Netflix all the time. Doesn't even own, cable TV or anything, so he does Netflix, for heaven's sake. Do you know if you watch a Netflix movie once a week, it is the equivalent, think about how many servers are lit up downstream. It is the equivalent of buying a refrigerator every year from an electricity consumption standpoint. The future is bright for electricity. Because I would argue we're getting more dependent on electricity, not less. What we should be doing, you and me, is seeking ways to sell our product. And you know what? That's not a dirty word. We're going to make somebody's life better. When I think about somebody's living in a trailer on a subsistence level, do they have a PC in their home? I don't know. I wish they did. If I could make my product more attractive, maybe they would. They could live in a better place. They could use air conditioning more. I mean, listen, I think the prospects to grow, we've got to change the mindset that our industry is a national energy policy that has been based on constraints is now based on abundance. Get into the abundance mindset, get out of the constraint mindset, and think about now what the future looks like. And I think we can make, excuse the pun, a very bright future. I really do. We got to get that way. If the issue behind your question is one of scale, then we're going to have to do collaborations. So another issue with you. And who else did I walk in with? We were talking about collaborating with government. Who was that? I walked in here with somebody. Yeah, there you go. You can raise your hand. It's okay. We were talking government programs. They want to do something. So what does the government do? They throw billions of dollars at a program, and the government tries to run it. Why don't we do gigantic prize efforts between the government and the industry? And why doesn't the government put out an incentive, not carrots, incentives? See, so much social legislation that is tied up in sticks, not carrots. Get the sticks out of here. Let's put in place carrots. Let's create incentives for companies to do the right thing. Let me give you an easy, dumb example. I think carbon taxes would be the dumbest thing on the planet. Not making any comment about carbon. Thinking our knee-jerk reaction as American policymakers is to tax anything that moves. But we don't like it, so we'll create sticks around carbon. Why don't we create incentives around carbon? And that's what I'm trying to do in the Southeast. Create optimal portfolios that manage in the best balanced way. Balance should be something we use all the time. Clean, safe, reliable, affordable. And I'll deal with carbon, and I'll do it better than EPA. At the same time, I'm going to preserve jobs, grow tax base, grow personal incomes, grow the economy. I can do that. I can do it way better than EPA. I get a better outcome than they will too. Piece of cake.
I think on that we should send you to Washington.
No.
It's even greater than now.
Well, let me finish. Thank you. We never say thank you enough in life. The fact that you're here, the fact that you're interested in trying to think about how this whole thing is going to change. We know it will change. Anybody that thinks they know where things are going are crazy. And so the wonderful thing about your presence here is you have some interest. I don't know why you're here, except for this beautiful place or to hang out with Llewellyn. But you're interested in change. You're interested in creating something that is so dear to our success as a nation. It's so wonderful to be invested in these solutions. So thank you. Appreciate it.
Can I do anything to get you?
Oh, no, I'm out.
What's that?
Oh, yeah, thanks. See you guys.
Tom, you did a marvelous job. One question. Why don't you run for president? You did a better job.
Oh, I don't know about
It
that.
was a really rewarding.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Good seeing you.
We'll be back shortly.
We'll resume where we were this morning at 2:30, or if you haven't finished your design, let's say 2:35.